you just remind me the numbers of the verses?
117.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskritya. Naram Chaiva Narottamam. Devim Saraswatim Vyasam. Tato Jayamudhirayat. Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu. Nityam Bhagavat Sevaya. Bhagavati Uttama-shloke. Bhaktir Bhagavati Naishtaki. Srimad Bhagavatam, which is very easy to complex. Respectful obeisances to the personality of Godhead and Godhead. Unto Dr. Maharishi, the supreme human being. Unto Mother Saraswati, goddess of learning. And to Srila Vyasadeva, the author.
And Srila Prabhupada, the translator and commentator. By written attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, established as the irrevocable fact.
So I'm sure you've noticed during a very important part of the Bhagavatam, this part of the punishment and reward of punishment, conversation of Dharma, there's so much heavy duty philosophy there. And today there's even more heavy stuff. So put your seatbelts on, okay? All right. We're reading from the first canto, chapter 17. We're doing text 20 to 23. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So text 20. All of these verses have, not all of them, have very good sized purposes. They're all very important things. Can you remember some of the important aspects of the conversation that's taken place already? Dharma, the bull speaking. Margaret wants to find out. Margaret wants to find out who's bottom. Remember some of the points so far? Been brought up? Something? Yes.
The age we're in is an abusive age to Dharma in there. And
Yeah. And obviously we're seeing it, day after day after day. Yeah, there's many other points. Try to spend some time on this chapter. Because karma is a big thing. We're seeing our life from life forward. Even if we're lucky, we can see from this life forward. Most of us even can't even remember what we did in this life. But when things happen to us, we're thinking it's unfair, it's this, it's that, or why it's happening. This chapter gives those some nuances to help keep one sane, humble, and on the path. Okay, so this text 20, Dharma is continuing to speak. Would someone like to speak?
Some thinkers who believe that no one can ascertain the cause of distress by argumentation, know it by imagination, or express it by words. O sage among kings, judge for yourself by thinking over all this with your own intelligence.
Okay, so now we want a summary of that in your own words. What did that verse just say? What did it mean? How did it describe it? Thanks.
Just from reading the text, I'm thinking, especially the first sentence there, that Dharma is saying there's some material philosophers that believe that there is no explanation for the cause of why that has happened to us. I was asking Scripture to think over this and to judge this opinion of these material philosophers for himself.
Okay, there's other nuances. Jonathan, you want to add something?
Yeah.
Sounds like it's actually
We actually looked at verses today. We were talking about karma, the percent karma.
It's really hard to understand how. Did you read it? Did you read it before? Anyway, it's a sign for today, so I'm going to keep going, okay? So let's go on, but please be thoughtful, because there's so many nuances here, and perhaps there's nothing particularly bewildering happening to you in your life, but something's going to happen. Okay, could you start reading?
The Vaishnavas, the devotees of the Lord, do believe, as above explained, that nothing can take place without the sanction of the Supreme Lord. He is the Supreme Director, and he confirms in the Bhagavad Gita 15:15 that he, as all-pervading Paramatma, stays in everyone's heart and keeps vigilance over all actions and witnesses all activities. The arguments of the atheists that one cannot be punished for one's misdeeds unless proved before a qualified is refused here. For we accept the perpetual witness and constant companion of the living being.
Hey, hold on a second. So there's an incident in Prabhupada's life when he was in school at the Scottish Church's College, and one of the Scottish professors there made this very argument in his class. One of the intentions of the British as they were ruling India was to denigrate the Hindu culture, etc. So they would always, they worked very systematically to always, point out what they did flaws in their superstitions. So that was one of his points that he was making, the professor was making. How can there be punishment for things that you are not a witness, things that you did in the past? So Prabhupada said that at that point in time he didn't argue with the professor, because he said it wasn't as strong, and he didn't know all the nuances of the philosophy as well. And but actually it was also especially in that setting of a college professor and student arguing. That was one of the things that common point. How can you say that you're suffering? Well, here's these subtle points that, you know, they're hearing quite often. It's really easy to say. The words come out really easy. But actually, when the subtleties or the nuances in life turn in such a way that it seems like total injustice is happening, it's really good to remember. Bruce, could you continue?
A living being may forget all that he might have done in his past or present life. But one must know that in the same tree of the material body, the individual soul and the supreme soul of Paramatma are sitting like two birds. One of them, the living being, is enjoying the fruits of the tree, whereas the supreme being is there to witness the activities. Therefore, the Paramatma feature, the supreme soul, is actually the witness of all activities of the living being. And only by his direction can the living being remember or forget what he might have done in the past. He is therefore both the all-pervading impersonal Brahman and the localized Paramatma in everyone's heart. He is the knower of all past, present, and future, and nothing can be concealed from him. The devotees know this, and therefore they discharge their duties sincerely without being overly anxious for rewards. Besides that, one cannot estimate the Lord's reactions, either by speculation or by scholarship. Why does he put some into difficulty and not others? He is the supreme knower of the Vedic knowledge, and thus he is the factual Vedantis.
Let's stop there for a minute and consider some of the points. What were some of the points that were just made in that paragraph? Yes.
That Krishna allows, the different living beings to remember things.
Think about some Sanskrit terms that were mentioned there about, Paramatma. Who's the sanctioner of the universe in Sanskrit terms? Like the super soul. Who's whispering it? Someone's whispering it. I heard a whisper. Paramatma is the super soul, but what does he do? He's sanctioning, and he's witnessing. Do you remember the Sanskrit? Upadrashta anumantascha. He's the sanctioner, he's the witness, and he's the sanctioner. So nothing's happening. These subtleties, they're so fine. This understanding of how we're responsible for everything that we do, but Krishna's there also in the heart, overseeing and permitting and sometimes restricting, because he has his all-pervasive knowledge, and he knows what the living entity desires, and he knows what the living entity deserves. But these subtleties, you don't get this information anywhere else. But, okay, anything else that you picked up from that part? Let's go on then. Any volunteers to read? Yes, go ahead.
Same time, he is the compiler of the Vedanta. No one is independent of him, and everyone is engaged in his service in different ways.
One second, sorry, I just thought another point that I wanted to stress. Just reminded me now, it's always not reminding me. Okay, besides that, a couple sentences before, besides that, one cannot estimate the Lord's reaction either by speculation or by scholarship. In other words, for example, let's just take an example. Someone might do a certain action, and deserve a quote unquote certain type of reaction. But Krishna can delay that reaction. He can serve it in a different way. He can come a roundabout way and do it in this way and do it. So many things that if you're trying to figure it out by logic or reasoning, it doesn't have to fit like that. But the devotee, having garnished so much knowledge about the Supreme Lord and having engaged in his loving service to whatever extent is possible by them, has this little seed of faith, this sprout of faith that's growing and growing and growing, that the Supreme Lord, out of his loving kindness, he's doing everything for our ultimate benefit. He knows the future. He knows our past. He knows what we quote unquote deserve. But lovingly, he's giving us so many things. Some might appear that we don't deserve to suffer as much, or might appear that we're overly getting overly rewarded for something, even though we did a sinful reaction. But somehow or other, it's all arranged by the Lord ultimately for the supreme benefit of the universe. Question or comment?
So, we person, but is that true for the people? Is that true for everyone across the board?
Well, it's explained in Nectar Devotion that once one, and I think it's true, once one comes through the threshold, the doorway of bhakti, even the very beginner, when one comes through the threshold of bhakti, then we're under the Supreme Lord's direct control. It's different than the karmic, the everyday person who's acting according to karma and whims without any understanding of God or understanding of Krishna. Those who make the attempt, just a reminder on Lord Ram's appearance day, one of the very most famous, most striking statements of Lord Ram when Vibhishan comes to serve, to surrender to Ram, having left his evil brother Ravana. And then there's a discussion whether they should allow him in. He flew over the airways, etc., to allow him in. And like, well, he's from the Rakshasa. Without going into too much detail, Lord Ram says, anyone who comes to me and says one time sincerely, I surrender to you, I am yours, said, I will give him protection. It's my vow. Doing that one time of sincerely chanting. So that's a different category of energy. Then you're under the internal energy of the Supreme Lord. And everything is meant for your spiritual advantage. For those who haven't come to that point yet are under the influence of the material energy. And if they do this, they get that reaction. If they do that, they get this reaction. It's very mechanistic, you know. But then it's the duty of the devotees to break that cycle for a non-devotee, to break that cycle of mechanistic good and bad reaction by infusing them somehow or other with kirtan, prasadam, something, and that'll begin them to cross, the opportunity to cross over to the other end. Yes. Jackson. I get an 8+. Okay, go ahead.
Often I hear Christians say something that sounds very, very similar to this when preaching about Christ. Mm-hmm. It's like they talk about their story of I forget what they call it, name for it, like where they surrendered, and it feels like this surrender. It was like a very big shift, like a major shift for many of them. And so how would you describe that experience in their surrender to Christ in relation to what we practice in surrendering to Srila Prabhupada and Krishna and Prabhupada?
Good question, and it's a good discussion. We don't denigrate that, we appreciate though, and that is all part of the path of surrendering to Krishna, all part of the progressive path for the living entity to come closer to the Lord. Some people have different experiences, but gradually, by sincerely endeavoring, they'll make progress further and further. And it might be slower, it might be faster, whatever, but it's definitely progress. Even though not the complete understanding is there at that particular point, but it's definitely progress in the path.
It sounds very surreal and very transcendental in the way that they describe it. When they describe their shifts and how much it changed their lives. And so I wonder, based off of the point you made, are they entering the internal potency?
Yes, definitely. They're definitely coming closer. And depending on how they utilize, take advantage of the information on the shift, then they'll get more opportunities. They'll get more and more opportunities. Anyone else want to help me with that a little bit? Jonathan? Somehow or other, I thought you would have something to say.
Yeah, I mean, basically, they're accepting Jesus of Nazareth as their spiritual teacher. He's in the heart. And Guru's there, helping make advancement towards God. Because when he was on this earth, that's what he did for people. He was in person, and he's still in spirit and still able to be connected with in the same way that we try to connect. We should talk about words and prayer, some action and mode of goodness, so he can reveal himself and show up, become sweet people right off the street, bring it back home.
Yeah, it's a process. It's a process. For some people, it happens in certain ways and step by step. Even in Bhagavad Gita, when he's first 6 chapters when Krishna is explaining the yoga ladder, and the Prabhupada gives the example of climbing the stairs. If it's a 100-story building and you're on the 5th floor, you're making progress. But if you stay on the 5th floor and you think that that's the goal, then you miss out on all the other further information. One has to keep making progress. So different processes of yoga even are described as progress in the path, but they're not the ultimate goal.
You were speaking about like the internal dissension, Guru, and then that brought up the question. I heard that the Guru is the external manifestation of Dharma. Can you elaborate more on that?
Well, yes, the Supreme Lord never leaves the living entity, the conditioned soul, without the highest guidance. They always have the highest guidance, but they're not always able to take the highest guidance, but they have it. Krishna's there in their heart. And that's, and some people only can feel that presence of the Lord in the heart in the form of, not as a person or a Lord or anything, they just feel a conscious. And if the living entity ignores that, continuously, then actually somebody described the Lord as the super soul speaks in a very soft voice. But if someone continuously ignores that soft voice of the conscious, they think in their consciousness, then they don't get that. They can't hear it. There's another speak to them. So the Gurus, we have the scriptures, we have the Lord in the heart, and we have the spiritual masters, the Guru, who directs us to become a thoughtful, but always relating the instructions of that external manifestation, because we can't always confident. Oops, okay. Okay,
Thank you so much. Just reflecting on what Jackson asked and Jonathan commented. There's a lecture of Srila Prabhupada on May 7th, 1968. Disciple asked Prabhupada whether Jesus Christ resides in Vaikuntha, the spiritual world, or Brahmaloka, the highest material planet. Prabhupada responded, no, Vaikuntha. He is a person. Brahmaloka is within this material world, and Vaikuntha is spiritual.
next. Doctor, did you have another comment?
Super soul. One of our other speakers, David Prosser, said that the more and more we listen and really yearn to serve Krishna, we get to a point where super soul isn't just offering us guidance, but literally takes the reins. And so it's no longer, hey,
Yes.
don't do that. Don't do
Yes,
that. It's just
exactly. Good point. Good point.
so how would you offer information on that?
I would say, remain steady in your practice. Don't expect immediate results like that right away. You know what I mean? They will come, but don't be expected. But be conscious, be aware, be thoughtful about what's happening internally, your thoughts and desires and how things are manifesting. And also, another caution would be, don't be overly confident that what you're thinking, or I'm saying you, I don't particularly mean you, I mean what we're thinking, I'll make it more general, okay? That what we're thinking is actually directed by the Lord. That's why we always need association, we always need peers, we always need mentors, we always need, we should consult with them often. Sometimes, I could give an extreme example, but no sense to give, some religious groups, they're thinking that if I kill all the non-believers, that's actually what God wants. You know what I mean? We're not going there. You know what I mean? We're not going there. But just taking just looking at Arjuna's position, right? So there he was on the battlefield Kshetra, about to fight a very, probably life's most important battle, in the whole Kshetra. And he's hesitant, not wanting to do it. And he's hearing from Krishna directly. And still, it's not like that all Krishna had to say was one or two things to him, and Arjuna was convinced, and, but he had to hear a lot. He had to ask his questions, get his doubts, answered, and get straightened out, making sure he had the right understanding, and then he was able to accept, Krishna. But he didn't. There's not so much incidence of people directly acting on things that they feel or think. It's like a slippery slope, because you never know if your mind's tricky or just throwing out a bunch of caution.
Wondering for some time, like the idea of not acting on my own intuitions is something that's quite new for me, because acting on my own intuitions is what brought me to Krishna consciousness. And so one of the questions that I have is like, how often and in what context are we supposed to ask for guidance? Because I also have this do I ask for literally everything? Do I have a mentor on WhatsApp, and I'm just like, hey, do I do this? Hey, do I do this?
Well, here's
hey.
Just a simple guideline could be, just say you get the inspiration, maybe I should chant some extra hours a day. There's nothing wrong with that. You know what I mean? Maybe I could do an extra service. Maybe I could be, do an extra thing for a devotee who's not feeling well or something like that. Things like that, there's no, but when you get, a little more maybe you should just leave here and go to another place and start a temple all by yourself. I would ask, you know? I would consult, you know, the simple things within our, you know, day-to-day framework. I think, you know, the positive things, it's not that, you know, I'm not saying that, but when it gets a little higher step, you know, you just kind of flash a bad example. But it's written down in Shama Sundar's Chasing the Rivals books. You know, so on your journey's first page, you know, Krishna. So they would go to the grocery store and they didn't have a lot of money, right? And everything they wanted to make prashada for Krishna, right? Distribute it to everybody, right? So they would put some things in the cart. That I'm doing this for Krishna. That's not how I'm doing it. So we can take it to extreme, thinking that because there's that saying that ends justify the means. Means that we think of the lies to meet that end.
Yeah, just 2 points. One, I'm really happy that you said that quote, "Go Paul," because I was hoping you would say that quote in my mind. And about Jesus and the Vaikuntha planets. Yeah, because yeah, when they born again, that's the term. When someone is born again and they really take shelter of Jesus. Thank you for saying that they do enter that internal potency, and they are having a spiritual religious experience with Jesus, and they are taking shelter. Prabhupada also said Jesus is our guru, right? So he is teaching guide consciousness, and the difference is that is Aishvarya, the awe and reverence. So that can lead to Vaikuntha planet, but unless they progress further from there, it can't lead to Goloka Vrindavan, because for Goloka Vrindavan you have to enter. It's a different mood. It's not the Aishwarya mood. It's the Madhurya mood, the sweetness mood. So it's more intimate. It's like it's so. And there are many instances of people. There's, like you said, that if you stay on this 5-step, or you can progress further. Like there are people who have that born again experience and they do just stay on that step. And then there's deep Christians and Christian mystics that go deeper. And I've read a lot of like Christian mystic books. And there's one book by Saint Teresa of Avila where it's called The Interior Castle. And in the later chapters, she's like literally having revelations of like wedded and unwedded love, which is like the gopis. Or there's other mystic saints who they basically only take prasadam after a certain amount of time, because so they or it's in the Bible. There's an image in the Psalms of like basically like Krishna's yellow dhoti. So there are people who then progress further, going towards that Goloka Vrindavan path, and then there's some who stay there. Yeah, and then I also wanted to say, oh Krishna, we were talking about Jesus, and what was the next thing that we were talking about? Oh yes, I remember. So I wanted to also share. There's an exact quote of Prabhupada, and I found this quote because I had the same experience in my life where I asked my spiritual teacher if when we were separate from him and we were praying to him and calling out to him, if he knew how much we were trying to love him, because I had this question of like, I'm not there, and does he know how much I'm praying? And he said to me, dear Champaklasa, Krishna knows everything and he tells me what he wants me to know. And I was like, wow, wow. And then I did some research, and there's actually the exact same quote by Prabhupada where someone asked him almost the same question, and Prabhupada said, Krishna knows everything and he tells me what he wants me to know.
Thanks for that. I want to push on because we haven't even finished this first purport. That's okay, no, but I'm going to skip the purport here. The rest of the purport I do recommend in your spare time or utilizing your time to read through here. just gonna read, because I wanna go to verse 22, but I'm gonna read 21. Just the purport or the verse. Sutta Goswami said, O best among the Brahmins, the Emperor Parikshit, thus hearing the personality of religion speak, was fully satisfied, and without mistake or regret, he gave his reply. So Parikshit Maharaj, when he heard this, the bull speak to him, he understood this is not enough. The nuances that he's saying are very fine and highly elevated. He's not an ordinary, carnivore. He is the personality of religion personified to bring out. Now this next verse here, this next verse, 22. Again, a little bit about what Champa Kalata just was commenting on. People get some religious enlightenment and some inspiration, but they don't always get the finer nuances of the philosophy. Just like so, and we encourage people to take whatever religious path that they're doing, but to sincerely follow. And that was Prabhupada's main complaint against, in general, Christians, that they accept Jesus Christ, but they don't follow his instructions. Particularly, they don't even see that all living entities are part and parcel of God, and that even the cow and the bull and what we eat, etc., and you're causing pain to everyone at every step of your life, and you're thinking this. So now listen to this one, number 22. This is one that we really need to digest, get into the nuances. Someone like to jump up? Can you read that verse, please?
O you who are in the form of a bull, you know the truth of religion, and you are speaking according to the principle that the destination intended for the perpetrator of irreligious acts is also intended for one who identifies the perpetrator.
Read that again, please.
Yes. O you who are in the form of a bull, you know the truth of religion, and you are speaking according to the principle that the destination intended for the perpetrator of irreligious acts is also intended for one who identifies the perpetrator. You are no other than the personality of religion.
You can't come to that conclusion without knowing many fine points of philosophy. That because what did Maharaj Parikshit just say there? What did he just say? Jackson, thank you for not calling me. That's what I meant to say. Yes. What did he say? What did he say? In your own words. Don't just read it to me.
The one commits some sort of philosophy or some kind of or something that's standard. The person who judges that is also going to be going to the same place as the original hierarchy.
Not just the judgment. Not just the, what did he say? Good. But not just the judgment. Something just happened. Something atrocious just happened. And they say, who did it? What's he saying? The person who identifies who did it. The person who identifies. This person is the cause of XYZ. Yeah. Especially if something happens to me, okay? I was molested as a child, and I say, it was my father that did it. Isn't that justice? Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Isn't that the accepted means of having that person punished? But he's not saying that to me. He's saying, and this is again, these are these very finer, highest understandings that everything happens by the will of the Lord, not unjustly, but because of something that we've done in the past. Right now, so far in the past, we don't make any connection that we did X, Y, Z, and therefore ABC is happening to us right now. We might not make the connection, but whatever is happening to us right now is because of something that's happened in the past, and I identify, well, it was this person's fault, or this institution's fault, or this, that, or this, well, that's what's missing there, and don't ask questions just yet, but you're welcome, don't forget your question, but what's missing there in the point that the person thinks this person did it to me? What's the point that's missing?
God consciousness, because you did something in a previous life that the perpetual witness there saw, and what's happening to you is actually as a result of your own previous actions.
Amazing, isn't it? It's not where the mind first goes. It doesn't go there after the second, third, or fourth thought, or day or year or month of contemplating these things. But that's the highest degree of God consciousness. You should go anytime tonight. Happy breakfast to you. That's the highest level of God consciousness. The highest level. And what? Not just fanaticism or this, but the most peaceful level. Nothing is happening without the consent of the Lord. Even it appears right now to me to have suffered that it was totally unjust. I didn't deserve it, this or that, blah, 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 blah. That's not the real, that's not really what's happening. And even if it is unjust or this or that at this particular time, there's a reason. Krishna wants us, even if it would be that there was no action on my part to have deserved to suffer like that, Krishna's bringing me to a higher level of consciousness if I take it and try to bring it to the higher. Can we read the purport? And maybe some questions or comments or, whatever will be answered, and then we'll try to take a little bit.
That's can we need the proof?
Yeah, you need a new battery. Okay, but anyway, because time is ticking on. Okay. Would you like to read the report? Someone? Sure, no problem. Okay.
That no one is directly responsible for being a benefactor or mischief monger without the sanction of the Lord. Therefore, he does not consider anyone to be directly responsible for such action. But in both the cases, he takes it for granted that either benefit or loss is God sent, and thus it is his grace. In case of benefit, no one will deny that it is God sent. But in the case of loss or reverses, one becomes doubtful about how the Lord could be so unkind to his devotee as to put him in great difficulty.
Okay, stop here for a second or two. Probably longer than that, but so what Srila Prabhupada's saying there is when good things happen to us, we think, oh, he's so good, so nice and so nice. And when bad things happen, we think, we don't put the same thing there. We have a different reaction. We have a different, the blame game starts, But again, although we're trying to develop our finer level of consciousness, oftentimes we're not at that point. And so these things we need to, at least while we're hearing them, we need to try to, and maybe things are going smoothly in our life at this particular point, we need to try to hear these points and remember these nuances so that when the test comes, when it comes, we'll be able to have a little relief from the anxiety that's caused. Okay, any other comments on that few sentences? Oh wait, hold on, John. I just thought of what he wants to say.
Like you said about accepting harms that are done to yourself as possibly being from a reaction of your action. Just two quick things that I have realizations on that is one, also the people that are doing the negative action to you will also receive karma. So you can't not forget that part too.
Totally true.
And
but if you don't mind my adding right there, by the Supreme Justice Maker. Like Yamaraj, that's his job. And someone might rob the bank. No, someone might rob the bank and they might not get caught. They might not get caught, but it doesn't mean they're not going to get caught. They're going to get the reaction. Sorry.
Yeah, so I just think that's such a big part of that cycle to keep in mind.
Yes.
And
Good
then
point.
also because it is really hard to hear, like, okay, you're a child and you took some injustices. I had a hard childhood too, but once I it's almost like understanding. It's called yoga can be called extreme acceptance, extreme responsibility. That I can take some responsibility and say, you know how long we've been around for?
Exactly.
Do you know that I have the propensity in me to do those things that were actually done? It's not with,
Yeah, good point. Yeah, that also is another, many good points. Thank you for sharing them. And yeah, I'm good. I'll try to finish the question and then I'll say what.
Jesus Christ is seemingly put into such great difficulty being crucified by the ignorant, but he was never angry at the mischief mongers. That is the way of accepting a thing, either favorable or unfavorable. Thus, for a devotee, the identifier is equally a sinner, like the mischief monger. Okay, so again, for the devotee, the identifier is equally a sinner. That's a very high, fine level of understanding, and you can't just jump to those conclusions or that level of realization, blindly. It's a step-by-step process here, but these higher, but the point is that we're given all of this information. Even in our neophyte stage, we're given this information and try to digest it gradually, little by little. And perhaps something happens and we are disturbed and it is unjust and this and that. That's not surprising. But we have this higher level of information that can rectify all the inebrities in this material world. Right. So just like the Tame who comes from Shushami Shamanam, Lord Brahma's prayer, that when anything good happens to me, I offer my respects to the Lord. When anything bad happens to me, I also am very grateful to the Lord because good or bad is coming by his. You can't come to those platforms. You can't just jump to that platform if you don't start understanding you're not your body, you're serving the Lord is kind to everyone, get the gradual understanding of the nuances of actions and reactions so that you can come to the highest platform. By God's grace, the devotee tolerates all reverses. Maharaj should observe this, and therefore he could understand that the goal is no other than the personality of religion himself. In other words, a devotee has no suffering at all, because so-called suffering is also God's grace for a devotee who sees God in everything. The cow and bull never placed any complaint before the king for being tortured by the personality of Kali, although everyone lodges such complaints before the state authorities. The extraordinary behavior of the bull made the king conclude that the bull was certainly the personality of religion, for no one else could understand the finer intricacies of the codes of religion. So again, these nuances, we could discuss all the, the exceptions in this, but does that mean that anything that happens, we should just sit down and just let the rug and get all, walked over and exploited? No, that's not what we're saying either. But still, again, that higher understanding, the highest level, that explains why people, the great devotees we hear their examples and pastimes in the Bhagavatam, how they can tolerate different things. Srila Prabhupada once said, don't be angry with the instrument of your karma. Whoa. All those little things, they give so much food for thought, don't they? And we hear it, and maybe you can even remember that phrase, okay, don't be angry with the instrument of your karma.
But then again, when an action plays out in life that has its apparent injustice to it and everything, and the needed reaction to that situation, it brings one to a higher level. It takes a huge endeavor to come to act on that point. But you can see when one is able to or aspiring to act on that platform, how much more. There's a lot to say, and there's not enough time. Okay, and let's just go on to text 23, and that's our last one for our quota. Shantanu.
Both the translations.
You can try until I interrupt you.
Translation. Thus it is concluded that the Lord's energies are inconceivable. No one can estimate them by mental speculation or by word jugglery.
That's where I really want to interrupt right there. The Lord's energy are inconceivable. His actions and how he acts and interacts with us don't have to be to our logical understanding. They're beyond our logical understanding. They're beyond. Why? Because we're so tiny and limited, and he's so unlimited and so all-powerful. And with full, complete knowledge of everything and all the interactions of everyone. We barely know what's happening in our life, and what to speak of how we're interacting and why we're interacting with these particular people in our life at this time. Krishna knows our story and our past and our future, and he knows the other people in our lives and why they're acting and reacting. But just Srila Jiva Goswami, he says, if you can't accept that the Lord's potencies are inconceivable, you'll never understand. You can't accept, in other words, you have to accept that the Lord's greater than us. That's quote unquote the translation of that. Look at that. Time and tide, wait for nobody. Hare Krishna. Some comments or discussion? Anyway, go if you can. If you can't do it today or the next day, make a note of this 17th chapter versus the whole thing, but especially verse 22. 22. Digestion. That's the key word. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Shri Prabhupada. Thank you for your attention. Bunch of
Bhagavan Prasadam ki